I'd like to call up to the stage my first panelists, Joachim Claudet, who is a research director at the CNRS, also Daniela Fernandez, the founder of the Sustainable Ocean Alliance, a network of young ocean actors, but who's also now creating a new ocean venture, of which we will hear more these next few weeks, and Nicholas Entrup, who's the director of international relations at OceanCare. Do please come and join. Thank you. Do sit down. So Daniela Fernandez that I just mentioned, Joachim Claudet, and Nicholas Entrup, thank you so much for joining us and for being with us on this important panel. We don't have much time, so we're going to race through as much as we can. First of all, ahead of this conference on the oceans in June, what is the urgency that the world should deal with the oceans? To each of you. How grave is the crisis?
Well, where to begin? And I think that this is the problem, that we don't have enough time. And as we heard from Sylvia Earle, there's actually 5 years left. And yet we are sitting on the sidelines looking at the ocean as if it's a spectator sport. When the reality is that although governments are going to be the ones that are going to be playing a very big role, civil society, the private sector, us as individuals, we have an enormous role to play as well. And yet the pressure is not being felt right now. It's not being felt right now by the entities who are going to be at the UN Ocean Conference, not being felt by the corporations who are actually in charge of making these changes. And so what I ask of you, and I actually want you to raise your hand, do you know that only 8% of the ocean is actually protected? If you knew this, raise your hand.
Wow.
Of that, only 2.5 is actually enforced. Raise your hand. Raise them high. Come on. We're trying to figure this out. Okay. Did you also know that 0.01 of climate financing actually goes to the ocean? Who knew that?
I did not.
So we are in a crisis mode, and this is not just for this one UN Ocean Conference. This crisis is a crisis for humanity and for our lifetime. And so as we're starting these conversations, I really just want all of us to wake up and to understand that it's our fate that's at stake right now. So as we think about what are the promises that these governments have, a lot of these promises are voluntary promises. They're not even legally binding promises. There's not a lot of time, and so I just want to start off and kick off the conversation by sharing that.
And we're very grateful, and we're going to come back to exactly those promises and the pledges and the more binding things that should or might come out of the forthcoming conferences. I'd love to get your view on exactly that, Joachim Claudet, how urgent this is, and responding to what Daniela just said. I did not know any of those figures, by the way, and I find them astonishing, as you must.
Well, it is urgent for many reasons. First, we do depend on the ocean for well-being. Even if we live in a city like Paris, far from the coast, the ocean is contributing to climate regulation, it's providing food, it's providing shelter, it's coastal protection, a lot of benefits to people, to societies. But our human footprint on the ocean has never been that large. There's no place in the ocean that is not impacted by human activities. And what we call the blue economy, the economy that is related to the ocean, is increasing at a worrying pace. And there is the 100 largest businesses that deals with the ocean. They concentrate 65% of the total revenues. So there are there's a clear equity issues in the ocean. And we know many of the solutions. We know what to do. We know how to manage the ocean. We know how to do everything more sustainably. But we are driven by short-term interest. And so we need to implement a shift, a transformative change to think more on the medium to long term.
Because in the meantime, Nicholas Entrup, and this is one of your areas of specialty, tremendous harm is being done, not just by things like deep sea exploration, but by the prospection, even to consider where the resources might be. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's absolutely right. I think the audience, some of you may recall, when you look 15 years back, There was a situation when you were staring at the TV screen, helpless, apathic, watching the Deepwater Horizon oil spill to take place. Hundreds of millions of liters of oil were spilled into the Gulf of Mexico and doing harm, resulting in hundreds of thousands of dead animals, seabirds, dolphins, turtles, etc. The scope of the area was around 150,000 square kilometers. That's 3 times Switzerland and even more. But today, it's out of your mind. 15 years later, science is still looking at the impacts on population level, declines of beaked whales, of sperm whales, of bottlenose dolphins, those charismatic species, but at the same time impacting on the marine ecosystem and the socioeconomic impacts on tourism in the area. But this is the visual impact we are talking about when you think about the oil industry. But every day there is another impact. And I would like to invite you for a very brief exercise. Imagine the ocean is an acoustic world. And acoustic sound is very important to orientate, to communicate, to find prey. But when you search for oil and gas, you imply air guns within seismic surveys, where explosive pulses are emitted every 10 seconds for 24 hours a day, weeks or even months, impacting from the smallest animal, krill, to the largest animal, whales. And this is happening for searching for new fossil fuels in this situation. When we have an Agenda 2030, when we have the Paris Agreement in place, they go in deeper areas, in protected areas, and this is the state we have today.
Wow. So that is an astonishing thing to imagine. That is that 10 years on from 2015 and all that hope that there was and the sense that the world was together, things continue to get worse and continue to be done, the harm of which is only beginning to be measured. How can that change? Daniela, what is the key?
Well, the first opportunity is really at the UN Ocean Conference, because this is a milestone event where not only are we going to look at governments to ratify the BV&J Treaty, number one, which again, we need to protect that 60% of the ocean that's outside of national jurisdiction. We have to create a legally binding plastics treaty. We're about to triple the amount of plastic going into the ocean, triple. And yet we're still waiting for nations to come up with some type of policy. We need to put a moratorium on deep seabed mining. We also need to bring a $3.5 trillion of economics to the blue economy. And so these are massive challenges that we have ahead of ourselves. And this is what we're looking at the UN Ocean Conference to understand and figure out all of these aspirations that we have, how soon will they become reality? And where is the financing going to come from? Where is the political will going to come from? And more importantly, what are each and every one of you doing to support this? And I'm looking at all of us, right? Because this is not just about pointing the finger at them, at the governors, at the politicians. It's about us. How are we taking that responsibility upon ourselves to actually say, how am I doing my part? So I do think that UNOC is one very important step. However, there's also the need for continuity. And I'll just give one example. There is actually going to be the Ocean Rise Coastal Resilience Summit that is going to be happening at UNOC. And what I'm really excited is that not only will that summit happen there, and it's going to be for local governors, for local authorities to take action. Because local populations are the ones being affected, and they have the opportunity to act in an immediate way. But not only would that summit happen, there's also a coalition that's attached to that for the work to continue and building on momentum. So I do think that UNOC may be a milestone to reach, but then we have to ask ourselves, what happens next? What happens in the next 5 years?
Joachim, what is your answer to that?
My answer is that we need to understand that there's a lot of things we don't know yet about the ocean. So we need more science, we need more knowledge. That is for sure. But we need to accept that science is not anymore the limiting factor for the fact that we don't take action. And we scientists who work on sustainability issues, we are we have a kind of fatigue to go from one conference to another, to hear government committing always to the same thing and saying, oh, we need to do this and we need to do that from one conference to another, and never do anything in between. And so there's many things that we know how to do them, we know how to implement them. The commitments are there, the CBD, BBNJ will be ratified. And so we need a shift now in how things are done. We need more accountability in commitments. We need those things to be binding. And we need to stop running after event and event, because yes, UNOC is an important milestone. Yes, we need to expect a lot from UNOC, but we need to expect even more from the recognition that we need to change in how we deal with the ocean. There's no technical fix that needs to be expected. It's only in how our societies will realize that we do depend on a healthy environment for our well-being, and that there is multiple dimensions to well-being. One is economic, for sure. There's no problem about that. But we can have sustainable development. But our well-being is also spiritual. It's also health. And every part of this is tied to a healthy environment. We need biodiversity for our development, and we need to enter the sustainability trajectory because we don't have more time.
Picking up, Nicolas, on what Joachim was just saying, it's true. The science is there. The awareness is there, much more than it was, say, 10 years ago amongst most people, of our link to nature and the need to improve it and respect and so on. What is the issue then with turning this into tangible things, obligations, the kind of binding agreements that we've been talking about so far? Is it the silos that exist between countries? Is it the silos that exist between scientific communities and politicians? What is it?
Okay, I think you touch upon the crucial point, because there is one additional element to that we do have decisions in place. The 2030 agenda you're referring to and why UNOC will take place is about checking, are we on track? Isn't SDG 14 about preventing and reducing pollution, all forms of pollution? Yes, it is. Isn't SDG 13 about climate action? Yes, it is. Isn't the Paris Agreement about a shift in the energy sector and energy sector transformation? Yes, it is. So why on earth do we still either not implement action or allow practices and activities to continue? And this is why we've teamed up. We've got support from more than 100 NGOs around the world from 6 continents, calling governments on to commit to ban oil and gas exploration in the ocean. That's not a very bright and brave and radical ask. That's just an inconsistent ask to go forward to UNOC. And you can still support it, because I can tell you the draft declaration does not include it. So 1 month to go, and we need to change that. We need to change that now. So I bring in the title of the conference again.
But Daniela, that is such a perfect example of something that is like manifestly in everybody's interest and a no-brainer, right? And that a number of governments could have implemented. Why not? What is the thing that makes it so difficult to make binding commitments to? Is it the pressure that comes from industry? Is it the difficulty of governments working together? Or the inability of the different actors to get together to put the necessary pressure?
Well, the first problem is that the ocean actually has a terrible PR agent. Because when we talk about the ocean, it's often left to the side. When we talk about climate, there's a lot of funding going to climate, a lot of energy going to climate. And so first of all, we need to have a lot more understanding of what's at stake if the ocean fails. And like Sylvia Earle says, there's no ocean, there's no green, there's no us, right? And I do think that, for example, right, at the UN Ocean Conference, I hope CNN will be there covering it.
I'm planning to, yes.
We will welcome you there. And I think we just need more people to understand why the ocean matters and how they can play a role and how they can help. And then they have to put pressure on their respective governments, corporations, build their own solutions to make this work. So I do think that there's a big disconnect in the work that we're doing in the ocean space very actively, and the work that people actually are aware of. And then there's also the problem, like, what do you do, right? There is so much climate anxiety that's happening right now all over the world, especially this next generation. Because collectively, every single one of us in this room, especially the next generation, we are the last generation to be able to do something to solve this crisis. I'm going to repeat that again because I have to let that sink in for a minute. Like, us living in this time, in this moment, we are the last generation to be able to prevent catastrophe. And we have 5 years to prevent catastrophe from happening. So no pressure, but all the pressure is actually on our shoulders. And I think it goes back to how are you yourselves up-leveling your own ambitions and the work that you're doing in your collective industries.
Given that urgency, and I think that's a great way of framing it, Daniela, that it's up to us or it's not going to happen. And I'm curious then, Joachim, what you think then of UNOC and the difference it will make, and whether there is any hope that we'll begin to get the kind of binding commitments that we need to be making the urgent progress that needs to happen on this issue.
The thing that needs to happen is really the recognition of that the time of nature is different from the time of politics. In most of the countries, not all obviously, but the electoral mandate are 4 to 5 years. And in most of those countries, people can be re-elected once, and so it's 10 years. Okay, the maximum someone in charge can. But for example, let's take the example of marine protected areas, which are a space that a delimited space in the ocean where you regulate human activities to ensure you reduce or eliminate the impact on biodiversity, so ecosystem can regenerate or restore themselves. It is very quick inside this marine protected area for nature to thrive again, but it takes a little bit more than 10 years for them to be effective outside of their boundaries. And so the benefits of those interventions sometimes don't happen during the mandate of the politician, and this is what needs to be changed. We need to think about cost benefits on a longer term, transgenerational, and stop thinking that sustainability is difficult because on the short term we have losers. We need to change. So we have losers on the short term. We need to change some practices, but on the medium to long term, everyone wins. And so we need this shift in perspective of that the time of nature is different from the time of politics.
That's a really interesting point. And on that, Nicholas, the question of, if you think back to 2015 and all the enthusiasm, the commitments we've talked about, the fact that the whole world signed on to them and everyone was aware and all this was going to happen in the next 15 years, and how far behind we are, do you feel that things are going in the right or the wrong direction? I suppose it's an easy question to answer.
Okay, well, I was told I have to be optimistic here, so I will go for that option. But I think there are 3 very, very big issues at stake at the UNOC in June. First of all, trust. How do you want to expect people to give trust in decision makers if they adopt decisions which they will always fail? So it's at risk that decision makers live up to the targets they set themselves. That's number 1. Number 2, science. We have to listen to science. It's out there, it's there. And if we need to know more, fine. But we have the precautionary principle in place, and we should have a protection principle in place, which is now in discussion to be developed. And third, and probably this is for the current days, the most important one is multilateralism. It's the belief in, if we want to protect this planet, we need to unify, we need to collaborate. And there is a trend, we don't need to name the elephant in the room, and there are more of those, that we need to expect leaders to stand up, to take the lead. Europe, take the lead. Don't wait for Santa Claus. Yes. You know, the small island nations, team up, bring other opportunities there, and be bright. And last word is, there are so many passionate negotiators out there that needs to be congratulated because they do a fine job.
Very briefly to each of the two of you, what tangibly, concretely do you want to see come out of this conference? And we'll put that to our next guests in the fireside chat, Daniela, and then to you, Joachim. What needs to happen in Nice in June?
I would say number 1, we have to have the integration of civil society. You know, I founded Sustainable Ocean Alliance because I fundamentally believe that young people really have to be part of these conversations and bring about solutions. Number 2, we need to finance everything that we're talking about, right? No matter how many commitments that are made, or no matter how many, 1,001 billion ocean startups that exist out there, if they can't get their next round of funding, I mean, just looking back behind us, there's so many solutions out there, but they're all looking for capital. Where is that capital going to be coming from? So that's number 2. Number 3, it's legally binding action. Voluntary commitments don't mean anything. A voluntary commitment can be made by any corporation, by any government, and that could go away because budgets change or because a new politician comes in the door. So I do think that legally binding action is necessary. And the last piece of it all is awareness. Let's make the ocean famous. Let's make the ocean sexy. Let's make the ocean something that people can actually get behind and understand. Because if we don't do that now, we're going to be speaking into the void.
And finally, Joachim, to you, the same.
Yeah, what I would say is that many of the objectives and targets that we already have from previous COP, the CBD COP, climate COPs, are good. They've been informed by science, they've been negotiated through multilateralism, and they're good. So we don't need yet new ones. We would, once they would be reached, but we need to start implementing them effectively, which is not the case yet. So we need to implement effectively what we have already committed to do.
Okay, sounds nice and simple, and we'll ask our next guests whether they think that's likely. Thank you so much to all three of you for being with us and for a fascinating chat. Thank you. Thank you.